My name is Morgan Hendris. I'm 32 years old. For 7 long months, my own sister moved into my house, slept in my bed, wore my clothes, and told every neighbor on our street that she was me. She answered to my name without missing a beat. She signed for my packages. She waved from my porch in my favorite sundress and chatted like it was nothing. Oh, Ryan's still overseas. You know how it is. Ryan is my husband. He was deployed for 14 months. While he was gone, my family, my own parents, moved my sister into our home like it was some empty rental unit. But what they did with his military benefits, the way they forged papers, redirected money, and hid it all, that turned a simple family problem into something that could have led to serious federal trouble. Welcome back to the channel, where we tell real family stories that begin with betrayal and end with finding your strength. If you've ever had someone close to you take what was yours, not just an object, but your name, your place, your home, stick around with me. Drop a comment below and hit subscribe. Ryan and I bought our house 4 years ago with a VA loan. It had 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a small backyard perfect for a grill and a lawn chair. It sat in a quiet neighborhood just 12 minutes from Fort Liberty. Folks there kept their garage doors open during the day and waved to everyone, whether they knew your name or not. I painted the kitchen walls a soft sage green. Ryan joked it looked like a hospital room. I told him it felt like home. We weren't rich, but we were stable, and in my family that made us seem loaded. I worked as an nurse at the county hospital, long 12-hour shifts, often at night, the kind that messes with your sleep. Ryan was a staff sergeant, solid and quiet. He called me his compass. I called him my constant. We'd been married 6 years and planned to wait for kids until after his next deployment. We had a solid plan, and the house was a big part of it. In my family, I was always the helper, the reliable one. When my parents needed their roof fixed 2 years back, I paid for it. When my sister Denise needed money for her apartment deposit, I co-signed the lease. I rarely said no. It wasn't weakness, it was just how I was raised. I thought being useful meant being loved. For a long time, my family let me believe that. Ryan used to warn me, "You carry everyone's bags, Morgan. One day you might trip." I laughed and said I had good balance. He was right. I just didn't see the fall coming. Ryan got his deployment orders in February, 14 months overseas. We'd handled shorter trips before, but this was the longest. He left in March. I drove him to the unit, stood with the other spouses in the parking lot, and held back tears until his bus disappeared. I cried the whole drive home alone. That's the hard part no one talks about with military life. The goodbye happens in public, but the sadness stays private. I got the house ready for his absence like I prepared a tray for a medical procedure, everything neat and in place. I set up auto pay, forwarded important mail, and installed a simple motion camera at the front door. I gave my parents a spare key. "Just check in once a week," I told my mom. "Water the plants, run the faucets so pipes don't dry." My mom, Janet, squeezed my hand and said, "Don't worry, sweetheart, your dad and I have it covered." I trusted her completely. They were my parents, it was just a house after all. I had my own plan for those 14 months, work hard, save money, stay busy so the quiet didn't get to me. Ryan and I talked when we could, short video calls at strange hours, quick texts full of love. "Miss you, same, stay safe." I didn't ask for much. I just needed someone to watch the mailbox. Denise is 3 years older than me. Growing up, we were close. She was the dreamer, I was the planner. By 25, I had my nursing degree and a marriage. Denise had Todd Prescott, a freelance plumber. He was handy, charming at cookouts, but not great with money. What we didn't know back then was that Todd had a bad gambling habit with online sports bets. He lost over $22,000 in 18 months. Denise said they were short on cash because an investment fell through. I offered help. She turned it down. Their rent went unpaid for months. When the eviction notice hit in April, it was too late. Denise didn't call me, she called our mom instead. That choice started everything. If she'd reached me, I would have found her a new place and helped with the deposit. But she went to the person with my spare key. By June, Denise and Todd had no apartment. Todd moved in with a buddy. Denise sat in her car with 2 suitcases and nowhere to turn. Mom drove over, packed the bags, and took her straight to my house. She used the garage code she'd seen me enter before. They walked Denise through my kitchen with its sage green walls and into my bedroom. "Just until you get on your feet," Mom told her. Dad helped carry the bags. No one called me. At first, Denise used the couch and her own things. But soon she was sleeping in my bed, wearing my robe, the one with the embroidered M that Ryan gave me for Christmas. She drank from my World's Okay Nurse mug. By July, she was answering the door in my sundress. New families on the block had never met me. They only knew the woman waving from the porch who called herself Morgan. "Hi, I'm Morgan," she'd say to the neighbors. "My husband's overseas." You know how it is, she told the mail carrier, and lawn service the same thing. She even said to one neighbor at the mailbox, I'm the real wife, just holding down the fort. It was like my name was a costume she could slip on. I finished my travel nursing contract in South Carolina in mid-July and returned to North Carolina. I didn't head straight home. I'd signed a short lease on a small studio near the hospital for the night shifts. It made the commute easier during deployment. I planned to check on the house on weekends, but shifts piled up and I ended up calling Mom instead. Every week on FaceTime, she'd answer from the porch or her car, never inside. When I asked to see the kitchen or the plants, she'd say she was out running errands and promise a photo. The one she finally sent showed a calendar on the wall stuck on March. It was already July. I called Dad. His answers were short and careful. Mom's handling it. Something felt off, the way she hid the phone, the way he dodged questions. I couldn't rush home mid-shift on a feeling. I tried to plan a visit, but the ER kept calling me in. I told myself I was worrying too much. If you've ever handed your keys to someone you trusted and later regretted it, you know that uneasy knot in your stomach. I felt it for weeks before I had real proof. Then came October. I was eating cereal at my studio counter when the mail arrived. Most was junk, but one envelope from the electric company stood out. It had been forwarded from my house. I opened it expecting my bill. Instead it said, Dear Denise Prescott, your electricity account at my home address has been updated per your request. I read it 3 times. I set the bowl down. I called the electric company. The representative confirmed it. The account holder had been changed 2 months prior, changed by the homeowner. I hung up and called the water company. Same thing, account transferred to Atris, the internet provider. Same, my sister had put the utilities in her name, not in my name, in hers. She wasn't pretending to manage my accounts. She was replacing me on them. I sat on the floor of that apartment with my back against the wall and my phone in my lap, and I didn't cry. I went still the way I do in the ER when a patient codes and there's no room for panic. My hands were shaking, but my breathing was even. I opened the camera app on my phone, the front door camera. I hadn't checked it in weeks. The motion alerts had become background noise, and I'd assumed the clips were just my parents checking in. I scrolled back through the footage, and there was Denise walking out my front door, wearing my sage green sundress, waving at the neighbors, checking my mailbox with her bare hands, smiling. I called my father first. Ray picked up on the second ring. I didn't yell. I spoke the way I speak when I'm telling a family that their father didn't make it through surgery. Flat, precise, Dad. Denise is living in my house. 10 seconds of nothing. Then Morgan, your sister needed a place. Talk to your mother. He hung up, not dramatically. He just ran out of script. I called Janet. She answered like nothing was wrong. Hi, sweetheart, how was your shift? I said, Mom, did you give Denise the keys to my house? The pause told me everything. Then the excuses came one after another, layered like gauze over a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. She's just staying there temporarily. She was sleeping in her car. Morgan, you weren't even using the house. She's your sister. What was I supposed to do? Let her be homeless. I let her talk. Then I said she changed the utilities into her name. She told the neighbors she's me. Silence. She's wearing my clothes. She's waving from my porch. She told people she's Ryan's wife. More silence. Then Janet's voice sharpened. You're overreacting. She'll leave when she's ready. When she's ready, I repeated. She's in my bed, Mom, in my husband's house, and she'll leave when she's ready. I told her I was coming that weekend. Janet said, Don't make this into a scene, Morgan. Denise is going through a hard time. Show some compassion. I said I bought that house with my husband's service and my night shifts. It is not family property. It is mine. Janet hung up. That was the last real conversation I had with my mother for 3 months. I went into ER mode. That's what I call it when my emotions shut off and my training takes over. No crying, no second guessing, just the next task and the next one after that. I opened a folder on my laptop and titled it House Documentation. Then I started building a case the way I chart a patient fact by fact, timestamp by timestamp. I printed the property deed, Morgan and Ryan Atris, recorded with the county clerk. I screenshotted every utility transfer confirmation. I called USPS and asked about forwarding changes at my home address. The clerk told me a forwarding request had been filed 2 months ago, not my forwarding a new one. Someone had redirected certain categories of mail to a PO box I didn't recognize. I called the base housing office next. A civilian administrator pulled up Ryan's file and said, Ma'am, we received a call about 2 months ago from someone identifying herself as the dependent spouse. She requested a BA verification form. We mailed it to your home address. BA basic allowance for housing, the monthly payment Ryan received to cover our mortgage. Someone had called the base pretending to be me, asking for forms related to our housing benefit. My hand stopped shaking, not because I was calm, because I was past calm. I was in charting mode and the chart was getting long. I didn't call the police that night. I thought about it, but I knew what they'd say: a family dispute, a spare key given willingly. A sister with verbal permission from our mother. I needed more than a complaint. I needed a file so thick that no one could call it a misunderstanding. So I kept documenting page by page, call by call. I opened the camera app again that night and scrolled through 3 months of footage. Most of it was Denise coming and going, morning and evening, like she'd lived there her whole life. She wore my clothes in almost every clip: the sage sundress, a denim jacket I'd bought at a thrift store in Fayetteville, a pair of white sneakers I'd left in the mudroom. She even carried my tote bag, the canvas one with the hospital logo, to the mailbox. Watching her was like watching someone rehearse for a role they'd already memorized. She had my posture down. The way she leaned on the porch rail, the way she lifted the mailbox lid with 2 fingers. But there were things she got wrong. She smiled too wide. I don't smile that wide. She waved with her whole arm. I waved with just my hand. And in one clip from August, Todd appeared. He pulled his truck into the driveway, walked through the garage, and didn't come out for 2 days. His toolbox was in my shed. His cooler was on my back patio. I called Colleen Marsh. Colleen had lived next door to us for 4 years. She was 58, retired, sharp as a tack. She picked up the phone and said, "Morgan, the real Morgan." My stomach dropped. "You knew?" "Honey, I knew something was off the day she showed up." She said she changed her hair, but she didn't wave the way you do. She never put the trash out on Wednesday night the way you always did. And she called me ma'am. You've never once called me ma'am. "Why didn't you say something?" Colleen's voice went soft. "Because I didn't want to cause trouble and I didn't have your number. I only had hers and hers was your landline." That Saturday, I drove 45 minutes to my own house. I parked in front of my own mailbox, the one that still said Atrix in block letters. My block letters, the ones I'd stankled on with Ryan the week we moved in. I walked up my own front steps and tried my key. It didn't work. The locks had been changed. I stood there for 6 seconds, key in my hand, staring at the deadbolt I'd picked out at the hardware store. Then I knocked. Denise opened the door. She was wearing my flannel, the red one Ryan wore when he grilled. She held a coffee mug, my mug, the world's okayest nurse mug. She looked at me with the kind of expression you give a neighbor who drops by unannounced. "Morgan, you can't just show up without calling. I live here now." I let those words sit in the air between us. "You live in my house. Mom said I could stay, and I've been taking care of everything. The yard, the mail, the bills. Where were you?" She said it like I'd abandoned the house, like she was the responsible one, like I should be grateful. I didn't raise my voice. The Carters across the street were in their driveway watching. 2 doors down, someone was walking a dog. I saw the neighborhood through new eyes. Every person on that block thought this woman was me. If I raised my voice, I'd look like the intruder. So I turned around. I got back in my car. I drove 45 minutes back to my apartment, not because I was giving up, because I needed a plan, not a scene. I looked at my own front door from the driver's seat and understood I was going to have to prove I lived there in my own house with my name on the deed. Back at the apartment, I dug deeper. I called Ryan. The connection was bad. He was on base overseas, voice cutting in and out like a radio station fading between towns. I gave him the short version: Denise in the house. Mom helped. Dad knew. Locks changed, utilities switched. Ryan went quiet, not the kind of quiet where someone's thinking, the kind where someone's holding something back so it doesn't break the phone. "Morgan, are you safe?" "I'm fine. I'm in my apartment. I'll handle this when I get Ryan. Let me handle it. I just need you to know." He said, "Okay, I trust you." The next call I made was to DFAS, Defense Finance and Accounting Service. I identified myself, gave Ryan's service number, and asked about recent correspondence. The representative pulled up the file and confirmed a dependent verification form had been submitted with our home address and a signature reading Morgan Hendris. The handwriting didn't match my signature on file. DFAS had flagged it and rejected it, but the attempt was there, documented, time-stamped on federal paperwork. My sister had forged my name on a military document, not a utility bill, not a gym membership, a government form tied to my husband's service. I sat with that for a long time. Then I pulled up Janet's bank records, not hers directly, but the Zelle history on Denise's account, which Denise had left logged in on the desktop computer at my house. I'd synced that computer to my cloud months ago and forgotten about it. $800 a month, 4 months running from Denise's account to Janet's, each transfer labeled from Morgan. My mother had been collecting money my sister sent her, money disguised as being from me. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment with every document spread around me like a crime scene map. 14 pages, property deed, utility transfer records, camera screenshots, DFAS rejection letter, Zelle receipts, forwarding change confirmation. I wrote the timeline by hand on a legal pad. Every date, every call, every lie I'd been told, and every truth I'd found underneath. Then I opened the closet. On the top shelf, behind a box of winter scrubs, was a tin Ryan had left before he deployed. He always left one. It was a ritual, something for me to find when I missed him most. I'd opened it the first week he was gone and hadn't touched it since. Inside, his real wedding ring. He wore a silicone band overseas and left the gold one home, a 4x6 photo from our wedding. Me laughing, him looking at me like he'd already made up his mind about everything, and a folded piece of paper. His handwriting tight, and even the way he filled out field reports, just this. This house is ours, come home to it. I read that note so many times the creases softened, ours. Not my family's, not Denise's, not Janet's to redistribute because she decided someone else deserved it more. Ours. I folded the note and put it in my wallet behind my nursing license. I kept it there through every phone call, every legal consultation, every night I spent in a studio apartment 45 minutes from the house I owned. When I doubted whether I had the right to fight my own family for my own home, I touched the edge of that paper. Ryan left me a note in a tin box. That note was heavier than every excuse my mother ever gave me. I called the base legal assistant's office the next morning. The JA officer was a captain named Erica Tran. She listened without interrupting while I laid out the timeline, then said 3 things I wrote down verbatim. 1. Forging a signature on a federal military document could be classified as a federal offense. 2. Someone occupying a home without the owner's consent, even if they had been given access by a family member, could be classified as an unlawful occupant under North Carolina law. And at minimum, the homeowner had the right to begin formal removal proceedings. 3. Changing utility accounts using someone else's identity constituted misrepresentation. She told me to file a police report first. I did. The officer who took my statement was polite and unhelpful. Ma'am, this sounds like a family matter. Your mother gave your sister a key. That complicates things. I told him I understood. I didn't argue. I filed the report and left with a case number and a copy of my own statement. Then I drafted a 30-day eviction notice. Captain TR had walked me through the template. Written notice, certified mail, return receipt requested. North Carolina required 30 days for a guest or unlicensed occupant. I addressed it to Denise Prescott, unauthorized occupant, at my own home address. I mailed it from the post office, watched the clerk stamp it, and kept the receipt. The letter arrived on a Wednesday. By Thursday morning, my phone rang. Not Denise. Janet, you're evicting your own sister. Her voice was the kind of loud that carries through walls. What kind of person does that? I said, the kind who owns a house, Mom. She called me ungrateful. She called me cold. She called me everything except the person whose name was on the deed. I let her run out of words. Then I hung up and went to work. Janet moved fast. Within 48 hours, my phone became a war zone. She'd called every relative with a pulse. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't spoken to since Thanksgiving 2 years ago. Every one of them had the same script. Aunt Carol Morgan, family helps family. You can't put your own sister on the street. Uncle Don, your mother is beside herself. Can't you just let Denise stay until she gets back on her feet? Cousin Rachel, I heard you're being really harsh. Is everything okay with you? 11 calls in 3 days. I answered the first 5. I listened to the same version of the story Janet had sold them, that I'd offered the house, that Denise had nowhere to go, that I was being cruel for no reason. Not one of them mentioned the locks. Not one mentioned the utilities. Not one mentioned the name on the mailbox because Janet hadn't told them any of that, so I told them. I sat down one evening after a shift and typed a single email. I attached the property deed, the utility transfer records, a screenshot from the front door camera showing Denise in my sundress waving at the neighbors, and a short paragraph explaining that my sister had introduced herself to the neighborhood as me and had attempted to access my husband's military housing benefit. I sent it to every relative who had called. Most went silent. 2 responded with apologies. Aunt Helen called back the next day and said, Janet told us you offered the house. She didn't say any of this. I thanked her. Then I added Helen's message to the folder because by then the folder was the only thing I trusted. Not voices, not family paper. The 30-day notice expired on a Thursday. I checked my camera that evening. Denise's car was in the driveway, the lights were on, she hadn't left. I could have filed a formal eviction through the courts. Captain Tran explained the process. Petition, hearing, sheriff's enforcement. In North Carolina, that could take 2 to 3 more months. I was calculating whether to start that process when Ryan called. The connection was clearer than usual. Morgan, my unit's rotation got moved up. I'm coming home early by 3 weeks. He'd be stateside in 5 days. I felt my chest loosen for the first time in months. Ryan, when you land, I need you to come straight home, not to the apartment, home. He understood immediately. You want me to walk in. I want them to see you walk in uniform through the door of our house while she's still there. He was quiet for a beat, then I won't call ahead. I won't knock. No, I said don't knock. That weekend I prepared. I printed 3 copies of the full documentation file, one for me, one for Ryan, one for Captain TR. I charged my phone. I texted Colleen, Ryan's coming home Saturday. I need you on your porch. Colleen wrote back in 2 minutes. Honey, I've been waiting for someone to fix this. I'll be there with iced tea and a clear view. I loaded the folder into my car. I checked every page. I pressed Ryan's note flat inside my wallet. There's a kind of calm that settles over you when you've done everything you can and now you just have to wait. It's the calm between the code alarm and the crash cart. I knew that calm. I trusted it. 5 days. I know what you might be thinking right now. Why didn't she just call the police and have Denise removed? I thought about it every single day, but here's the truth about family betrayal. The hardest part isn't the legal process. It's standing in front of someone who shares your blood and saying, "You are not welcome in my life anymore." That moment was coming and I wasn't going to waste it. Ryan's flight landed on a gray Saturday morning. I was at the terminal gate before the sun came up. Staff Sergeant Davis, one of Ryan's guys, had texted me the arrival time. Ryan hadn't told his unit to organize a homecoming ceremony. No banners, no families lined up on the tarmac. Just me standing in a parking lot with a folder on my passenger seat and a knot in my stomach. He walked out of the terminal in his uniform, thinner, darker. A crease between his eyebrows that hadn't been there 14 months ago. He saw me and his face did something I'd never seen it do. It broke open for exactly 1 second, then sealed shut again. He wrapped his arms around me and held on like I was a guardrail on a mountain road. We stood there for a while, no words, just breathing into each other's shoulders while other soldiers streamed past with their own families, their own reunions. In the car, I handed him the folder. He opened it in his lap and started reading. I drove. He didn't speak for 20 minutes. I watched his hands. They tightened on the edge of every page. His jaw worked like he was grinding something down to dust. He finished the last page, closed the folder, and looked straight ahead. Your mother knew, my mother arranged it, and your father. He said, your mom's handling it. Ryan pressed his lips together. He stared out the window at nothing. 5 minutes later, he said, drive home, not the apartment, home, our house. The one with the sage green kitchen and the mailbox that said Atrix and a woman sleeping in our bed who wasn't me. I parked 2 blocks from the house. We sat in the car with the engine off, looking down the street at our own front door. The porch light was on, Todd's truck sat in the driveway, mud splattered, toolbox strapped to the bed. He was there too, Saturday afternoon, making himself at home. Colleen was on her porch with a glass of iced tea and a magazine she wasn't reading. She saw my car and gave a small nod, didn't wave. She knew. Ryan reached into his duffel in the back seat and pulled out his dress uniform jacket. He buttoned it over his undershirt, adjusted his beret, laced his boots tight. I asked him why. He said, I want them to see exactly who lives here. I picked up my folder, phone in my pocket, camera already recording. The spare key I'd kept, the one to the old locks, the ones Janet changed, sat in my cup holder. Useless now, I brought it anyway. We walked side by side down the sidewalk, past the Carter's yard, past the house with the wind chimes, past Colleen's porch. Mr. Carter was outside trimming his hedge. He looked up and froze. He'd never seen a soldier walk toward the house before. Denise had told him Ryan wouldn't be back for months. Afternoon, Ryan said to Carter as we passed. Carter didn't answer. He just stood there with his clippers halfway through a branch, watching a staff sergeant in full uniform walk up the front steps of a house where his wife, the woman Carter thought was Ryan's wife, was inside. Ryan put his hand on the door handles. He looked at me. I looked back. He turned the handle. The door was unlocked. He didn't knock. The living room looked like mine and didn't look like mine at the same time. The couch was in a different spot. The throw pillows were rearranged. The bookshelf had been emptied and refilled with things I didn't recognize. Romance novels, candles, a framed photo of Denise and Todd at some beach I'd never been to. But on the wall above the mantel, our wedding photo still hung. Denise had kept it, she needed it. Without it, the story didn't hold. Todd was on the couch. My couch, bare feet on my coffee table, beer in one hand, remote in the other. Snorts, he looked up when the door opened. He saw Ryan in uniform, and his face went through 3 stages in 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, and the sick dawning of someone who just realized the exit is behind the person walking toward him. Who the hell are you? Todd said, already knowing. Ryan didn't blink. I'm Staff Sergeant Ryan Hendris. This is my house. Who the hell are you? Todd's beer slipped. He caught it, but not before spilling half of it on the cushion. Look, man, I can explain. The bathroom door opened down the hall, water sounds, steam curling into the hallway. Denise walked out in a towel first, then stopped, went back in, and came out wearing the bathrobe. My bathrobe, the white one with the embroidered M, her hair was wet. Her face was flushed from the shower. She looked down the hallway and saw Ryan. She saw the uniform. She saw me standing just behind him in the doorway. Her face went from pink to white in a single breath. Ryan looked at the bathrobe, the letter M stitched in navy thread above the pocket. He looked at Denise, then at me, then back at Denise. Take that off, he said. It's not yours. Denise went into the bedroom and came back in her own clothes. First time in months from what I could tell. She sat on the edge of the couch, my couch, with her hands clasped between her knees. Todd was standing by the kitchen doorway like a man measuring the distance to the nearest exit. Ryan stood between the living room and the front door, arms crossed. He didn't sit. I set the folder on the coffee table, opened it, laid the pages out one by one. The way I lay out instruments before a procedure: deed, utility transfers, camera screenshots. DFAS form with the forged signature, Zelle receipts, police report, eviction letter, return receipt from the post office. You moved into my home, I said. I kept my voice level. Not loud, not soft, flat like reading vitals. You wore my clothes, you told people you were me. You tried to access my husband's military benefits, and our mother helped you do it. Denise started crying. Not the theatrical kind, the raw, ugly kind where the face crumples and the breathing goes ragged. Morgan, do you know what it's like to lose everything? I didn't have anywhere to go. I called you and you didn't answer. I called Mom and she said you wouldn't even notice. I thought if I just held things together here, you'd come back and it would be fine. I heard it. I let it sit, I almost felt it. Then I turned to the next page in the folder, the DFAS form, the one with my name and handwriting that wasn't mine. You signed my name, Denise, on a federal document. That's not holding things together, that's fraud. I didn't think. No, I said you didn't. Todd moved toward the back door. Ryan shifted his weight, didn't touch him, didn't raise a hand. Just stepped into the path and said, sit down, we're not done. Todd sat. Denise had called Janet the second she came out of the bedroom, reflex, the way some people call a lawyer. Denise called our mother. Janet and Ray arrived in 15 minutes. I heard their car pull up. Janet's door slammed, Ray's closed gently. Janet walked in through the front door, past Colleen's porch, past the Carter's frozen hedge trimming, past the mailbox that said A-Tricks in my handwriting. She saw Ryan in uniform. She saw me with the folder. She saw Denise crying on the couch and Todd trying to become invisible against the kitchen wall. Now Morgan, Janet started. Her voice was the one she used on telemarketers. Firm, dismissive, already halfway through the conversation before it began. Let's not blow this out of proportion. Denise was going through a hard time. I didn't raise my voice. I opened the folder to the deed. Mom, you gave her my keys. You helped her move in. You changed the locks on my house. You let her pretend to be me. You took $800 a month from her. Money she told you was from me. None of it was from me. Janet's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I was trying to hold this family together. I looked at her. I thought about every phone call where she angled the camera away from the windows. Every photo from March she sent in July. Every time she said, don't worry, I said, you were holding it together by taking mine apart. Ray stood by the front door. He hadn't spoken. He hadn't moved past the entryway. His hands were in his jacket pockets, shoulders hunched like a man trying to take up less space in a room he knew he didn't deserve to be in. I turned to him. Dad, he flinched. Not visibly, just a tightening around the eyes, a swallow that took too long. I called you, I asked if the house was okay, and you said I waited. I wanted him to say it himself. He didn't. So I said it for him. You said your mom's handling it, that's what you said. You knew Denise was here. You knew she was pretending to be me. You knew Mom changed the locks. You knew about the money, and you let it happen. Ray's face broke, not anger, something worse. Shame that had been building behind a dam of silence for months and had nowhere left to go. Morgan, I'm sorry, I should have told you. I was a coward. His voice cracked on the last word, his eyes were wet. He looked older than 63. He looked like a man who had spent his whole life choosing the wrong kind of peace. I said, yes, you were. I didn't comfort him. I didn't reach for his arm. I didn't tell him it was okay because it wasn't. There's a difference between understanding why someone failed you and forgiving them for it. I understood Rai perfectly. He was afraid of Janet. He was afraid of conflict. He was afraid that saying the truth would mean losing the quiet life he'd arranged around his recliner and his television. He chose comfort over his daughter. I understood that, I just couldn't live with it anymore. The front door was still open. Colleen was on her porch, the Carters were in their yard, two more neighbors had drifted out. The young couple from the end of the block and the retired postman 3 houses down, they could hear everything. The acoustics on that street were brutal: open porches, flat yards, no fences. Every word carried like a church bell. Mrs. Carter stepped forward. She looked at me, then at the open doorway behind me where Denise's outline was visible through the screen. "Morgan, what's going on? Are you okay?" Before I could answer, Colleen's voice came from the right, steady and clear as a reading lamp. "That woman in there is not Morgan, that's her sister. She's been pretending to be Morgan for months." Mrs. Carter's hand went to her mouth. "What?" She looked at me, really looked, then looked back at the house. "But she told us she was." "I know what she told you. I said she told you she was the wife of a deployed soldier. She told you her name was Morgan." She waved from this porch and smiled and collected my mail and answered to my name. I looked at the street, at the neighbors, at the people who'd been deceived along with me. "My name is Morgan Hendris. I'm the real wife and I'm taking my house back." There was no applause, no gasps, just the sound of Colleen setting her iced tea down on the porch rail and nodding once. The way you nod when something you've suspected for months finally lands. I walked back inside. The door stayed open. I wanted the air from outside to reach every corner of that room. I picked up the property deed and held it where the light from the window caught it. "This is the deed to this house. My name, my husband's name recorded with the county, no one else." I set it down and picked up the utility records. These are the accounts she changed into her name. Electric, water, internet, all transferred without my knowledge or consent. The camera screenshots. This is her in my clothes on my porch waving at the neighbors who thought she was me. The DFAS form. This is my name forged on a federal military document submitted to the Defense Finance and Accounting Service in an attempt to access my husband's housing benefit. Janet stepped forward. "Morgan, stop. You're embarrassing this family." I looked at her, at the woman who gave away my keys, changed my locks, collected money under my name, and told 11 relatives I was the villain. "No, Mom. You embarrassed this family. I'm just showing people the truth." Ryan stood beside me. He hadn't said a word since telling Todd to sit down. He didn't need to. His uniform said it. His posture said it. His hand on my shoulder said it. Denise made one last attempt. Her voice was shaking. "I was going to leave. I was going to tell you." I closed the folder. "You had 7 months. You had my keys, my clothes, and my name. The only thing you were going to tell me was nothing." The room was quiet. Denise sobbed. Janet's mouth was a thin line. Todd stared at the floor. Ray cried silently by the door. Ryan and I stood in the middle of our living room still. Todd made his move. He pushed off the kitchen wall and headed toward the back door. Ryan was faster, not aggressive, just present. He stepped into the doorway and filled it. "You've been sleeping in my house," Ryan said. His voice was low, the kind of low that doesn't invite a response. "Using my garage, storing your tools in my shed. Your truck's been in my driveway 14 times in 3 months. I've got the footage. So before you walk out that door, tell me you didn't know what your wife was doing." Todd's eyes flicked to Denise, then back to Ryan. "I didn't plan any of this." I opened my phone, scrolled to the camera log. "Here's your truck. August 12th, August 19th, September 3rd. All weekend stays. Here's your toolbox in the garage. Here's your cooler on the patio." I looked at Denise. "He told you he was staying at Kevin's." Denise's head snapped toward Todd. "You said you were at Kevin's." Todd swallowed. "I was sometimes, and the gambling," I said. "Does Denise know about the $22,000? Everything stopped. Todd's face went from cornered to something beyond that, exposed the way a wound looks when you pull back the last layer of gauze. Denise whispered, "What, $22,000? I didn't have Todd's bank statements, but I had the account history from the desktop computer, the one Denise had used in my house, still synced to my cloud. Withdrawals to 3 online betting platforms monthly escalating. That's private," Todd said. I shook my head. "Nothing in my house is private anymore. You made sure of that." Denise looked at Todd. She looked at him the way you look at someone when you realize the person you trusted was the reason you lost everything. I turned to Janet. "One more thing, Mom." I pulled up the Zelle records on my phone and turned the screen so everyone could see. $800 a month from Denise's account to yours, 4 months running, every transfer labeled from Morgan. Janet didn't move. Her face was still set in that thin, righteous line. The face of a woman who believed being right was a matter of volume and repetition, but her hands gave her away. They were shaking. "That money wasn't from me," I said. "You knew it wasn't from me because I haven't sent you $1 since I paid for the roof 2 years ago. You didn't ask where it came from because you didn't want the answer. We needed it for your father's insulin, then you should have asked me." You didn't ask because you knew I'd find out Denise was in my house. The money was the price of your silence. Ray, who had been crying softly by the door, looked at Janet. You told me Morgan was sending that money. You told me she knew about Denise. Janet's composure slipped. I had to, Ray. We needed you lied to me. Ray's voice rose for the first time since he'd walked in. Not a shout, a crack, the sound of something structural giving way. You told me our daughter was okay with all of this. You told me she offered the house. You told me the money was a gift. It came apart fast after that. Janet's credit card debt, $9,000 she'd hidden from Ray. The insulin was real, the debt was extra. She'd been juggling both, using Denise's redirected money to cover minimum payments Ray didn't know about. Ray stared at her. 40 years of marriage, and he was seeing the balance sheet for the first time. I closed the folder, set it on the coffee table, looked at each of them. Denise, Todd, Janet, Ray. The way I look at a chart when every vital sign is trending the wrong direction and the only treatment left is the one nobody wants to hear. Here's what's going to happen, I said. My voice was the same one I use when I tell a family that treatment options have narrowed. Denise, Captain Tran prepared a voluntary vacate agreement. You sign it. You're out by tomorrow morning with your belongings, and I don't file the federal paperwork for the forged documents. That's the offer, and it's a better one than you'd get from a judge. I set the single-page form on the table. Denise stared at it. She didn't reach for it, but she didn't look away. Todd, your tools and your truck need to be off this property by 8:00 a.m. If they're still here at noon, they go to Goodwill. Mom, Dad, I'm not pressing federal charges. Not because what you did was okay, because I don't want to spend the next 2 years in a courtroom when I could spend them rebuilding what you broke. I stepped closer to Janet. But here's the boundary. You don't come to this house without an invitation. You don't have a key. You don't make decisions about my home, my mail, my name, or my life. If you can respect that, maybe we talk again someday. If you can't, then this is goodbye, Janet started. Morgan, you can't cut off your own mother. You cut me off from my own home. I'm just returning the favor. Nobody answered. I walked to the front door, turned back once, looked at Denise. She was standing now, arms wrapped around herself, chin trembling. I said, you told the neighbors you were the real wife. The real wife is the one who comes back and stays. Ryan placed his hand on the door frame, fingers spread, palm flat against the wood. He looked at the room, he nodded once, then he closed the door behind us from the outside. Sunday morning was quiet. Denise packed in silence. 2 suitcases, the same 2 she'd arrived with in June. She stripped the bed and left my sheets folded on the mattress. She put my bathrobe on the hook behind the bathroom door. She left the world's okayest nurse mug on the counter, washed and dried. Todd came at 7. He loaded his toolbox and cooler into his truck without speaking. He didn't look at me, he didn't look at Ryan. He backed out of the driveway and drove away with his windows up, and I never saw him park there again. Denise stopped at the front door on her way out. She looked at me. Her eyes were puffy and raw, the skin around them pink from a night spent crying. I'm sorry, she said. I know that doesn't fix anything. It doesn't, I said, but I heard you. She nodded, walked down the steps, got in her car, drove away. Janet and Ray were parked at the curb. They'd come to pick up something Janet had left in the kitchen, a casserole dish of all things. Janet didn't come inside. She sat in the passenger seat with sunglasses on. Ray walked to the door. He held the dish. He looked at me and opened his mouth, then closed it. I took the dish. Take care of yourself, Dad. He nodded and walked away. I watched them drive off. Ryan came up behind me in the doorway. He put his arms around me and rested his chin on the top of my head. We stood there looking at the empty street, the quiet porches, the mailbox with our name on it. I need new dishes, I said. She used all of mine. Then we'll buy new ones and a new bathrobe with a bigger M2 marriages ended that year. Neither of them was mine. Denise filed for divorce in November. Once she learned about the $22,000 Todd had gambled away, the debt that cost them their apartment, their stability, their dignity, she didn't hesitate. The divorce was final by spring. Todd was required to complete a gambling addiction program as part of the settlement. Denise didn't fight for much. She moved to Raleigh, got a job at a restaurant, and started over in a city where nobody knew her name. She didn't call me, I didn't call her. Janet and Ray separated in December. When Ray dug into the finances, something he should have done years earlier, he found the credit card debt, $9,000 Janet had accumulated and hidden. The insulin costs were real. The rest wasn't medical. It was years of small purchases, impulse buys, minimum payments rolling into interest until the hole was too deep to mention. Ray moved in with his brother in Fayetteville. He told me later on the phone, I spent 40 years trusting her to handle things. Turns out she was handling me. They never formally divorced. They just stopped sharing a roof and a checkbook. Whether they'll find their way back, I don't know. That's their story to write. Morgan and Ryan Hendrick stayed in the house on that quiet street 12 minutes from Fort Liberty. I changed the locks one final time. I kept both sets of keys. I didn't give one to my parents. I didn't give one to my sister. I put one in the kitchen drawer and the other in the tin box on the top shelf of our closet next to Ryan's ring and the note that said, "This house is ours." 6 months later, Ryan finished his service contract. We started trying for a family. I went back to day shifts at the hospital. On Saturday mornings, I sat on the porch with coffee and watched Colleen water her flowers next door. "Morning, Morgan," she'd call. "Morning, Colleen." Every time she said my name, I felt it land. I lost my sister not to death, to something quieter, to a silence neither of us has broken. I lost the version of my parents I thought I had. The version where they were fair, where they loved us equally, where they wouldn't steal from one daughter to rescue another. That version was never real. I just believed in it longer than I should have. Ryan and I repainted the bedroom. New color, a warm gray that didn't remind me of anything. We bought new dishes, new towels, a new bathrobe. We kept the mug. Some things you reclaim, some things you replace, and some things you just lock the door on. Home isn't the house you buy, it's the door you get to lock and the people you choose to give the key to. That's my story. 14 months of deployment, 7 months of impersonation, one Saturday afternoon that ended it all. If this story reminded you to check who has your spare key or to trust the feeling when something doesn't add up, take that as your sign. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share this video with them. Thank you for being here. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.